involved in Vietnam from about 1959 on. And Tonkin was what, 64?
64, correct.
Yeah, well, we were involved, you know.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we'd been involved for a number of years. Yeah,
Well, I remember meeting people coming back from Vietnam in 1961 when I was a
yeah,
kid, and
yeah, yeah.
they had been advisors, and I remember Colonel his name was Malficas, I believe. He became I think he was when he was a brigadier general, he was involved in the support for the Cambodians after the overthrow of Sihanouk. But I remember meeting people like that. But I was a kid. It was like, and then I remember, I think it was 61 or 62. There's this CBS reports, and I remember watching these guys hitting the silk. They were showing the way that started the TV piece was just paratroopers jumping I guess in a practice jump in South Vietnam. And I remember asking my father, I said, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to fight there? And that point in time, I didn't realize he was, very much involved in all that policy making as a major, uh,
Hmm.
basically as a rapporteur in the National Security Council. But I had no knowledge of all that. And I do remember the Battle of the Dien Phu as a kid on TV. I remember that for some reason, when I saw that in 1954, that stuck in my mind.
What
Uh,
battle?
the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. I remember that on
Oh
TV.
yeah, yeah. I've been to Dien Bien Phu.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was the Gettysburg of North Vietnam.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah.
When did you go to Dien Bien Phu in the past
Well,
20?
I took a tourist group to Vietnam, and we went to Dien Bien Phu. You know,
Wow.
we flew up to Saigon and then flew out to Dien Bien Phu, and did the battlefield for a couple of days. Had an old retired North Vietnamese colonel who'd been there as a lieutenant. He took us around.
Wow.
He took us around to the positions, and we'd go and he'd say, here's where I was with my platoon, and here's where my platoon leader was shot and killed, and here's where this happened. Oh, it was fascinating stuff. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow. Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, there was a guy I knew who wrote a book about the siege of Dien Bien Phu. He was an interesting character. He had been a Yale graduate, but he was a French citizen, so he was drafted in the French army during the war in Algeria. He served in Algeria with the French army.
Hmm.
And he later became a American news reporter, won the Pulitzer Prize. So he
Hmm.
did a book on Dan Buchanan too. His name was Ted. Actually, his name was Morgan too. His name was Ted Morgan, and he's no longer alive. But he was a great guy. He lived with his wife, was French, and uh, and he did this whole book on Dien Bien Phu. And I remember I brought him to speak about it at Columbia actually. And it was sort of interesting because the professors who allowed me to bring him there, they said, "Well, Jim, I don't think anybody will come." I said, "Well, you never know." And we had a nice crowd for that kind of subject, but still, here he was. He was an interesting guy because of his experiences as a young man. His family
Yeah,
had
well,
to
we
flee.
had after World War II, we had given the French about 90 DC-3 aircraft. So they had a flotilla of aircraft, and they used it for their airborne operations.
Right,
Dien Bien
right.
Phu was one of the biggest ones, but they had some others.
Absolutely.
But
No,
they parachuted in. Then the NVA closed the runway, and they
right,
couldn't get any reinforcements. They're stuck, you know,
right, 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 right. No,
and and they just dwindled and eventually had to
no,
surrender.
it's true. It's true. It's funny. It's one of the little. I guess before I go into the great beyond, it's one of my little projects to. I've got tons and tons of pictures of Dien Bien Phu from the French. I got a book of French aerial photographs
Yeah. Hmm.
during the battle itself, and it's quite remarkable, actually. I'd have to go through all my different scanned material, but I always figured, boy, that'd be really interesting to do a.
Well, there's been a couple of movies made about it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
I don't think they were particularly good, but there's been a couple
Yeah.
made. Yeah.
Well, there was one actually made by a veteran of the battle, Pierre Schoendorfer,
Mm.
who did one of the best movies I ever saw on the first Indochina. Actually, one of the best movies ever done in Vietnam. Period. It was a movie about a French patrol. that has to retreat from Laos, and basically they're pursued by the PABIN. The PABIN are pursuing them and eventually destroy them. But
Mm,
it's a
yeah.
very powerful film. It's really wow. It was like done in 1961 or 62. Uh, it was really I don't think it really got any play in the United States, unfortunately. But in France, it was one of these like grim, sort of like some of the grimmer black and white World War II movies after the war that occurred mainly in Europe. But not we were not doing movies like that. They were not considered marketable.
Well,
But
we had given the French some light tanks, I think 10, and they're still on the battlefield at various states of
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
disrepair. Some of them are monuments, and some of them are just junk sitting there.
Oh
You
yeah.
know.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, many years ago, I interviewed all the living veterans of the OSS Deer mission that went to Vietnam in 45. All the guys who were left, I tracked them down, and they were quite remarkable because one of them lived in Ireland. Another one lived out in the Bay Area. He was supposedly the person who suggested to Ho to use the Declaration of Independence for the statement that he made in August of 1945 when they declared independence from France. And they were all, and it was, because they were dropped in there essentially to help rescue Allied shot down pilots because the Viet Minh, they figured this was a time when we were sort of toying with Mao Zedong with the
Mhm.
Dixie mission. So that was interesting stuff. I have no idea. I think that stuff's down in Texas, those actual tapes. I have to go look and see if I have them because they're dispersed all over the place. But I told the guys down in Texas to digitize that stuff because I don't think many people have a verbal like long. I did a long. It was long discussions with these guys about their experiences in the war. And they were all very interesting guys. So a lot of them had fought in Europe, and then they were transferred from after D-Day. A couple of them had been Jedburghs, so they were experienced with the kind of essentially the OGs and Jedburgh type models that then were transferred in setting up special forces after World War II. But interesting guys, very interesting guys. Um, well, that's interesting. So it's only three of us. Um, what do you want to talk about, Kenny?
I just talked with Alex. He'll be here in a minute,
All right,
but he's got some interesting things
all right.
which I can play, I guess. And but I just wanted to follow up something. So you're saying these guys after D-Day, and then they sent them to Vietnam.
Well, no, they sent them. These were the the
They came
not,
down from China. They
yeah,
infiltrated them in from
they came.
China.
That's right. They came in from China.
Yeah,
They were that
and
it's
they
the
were
whole.
mostly CIA type guys. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
the guys would eventually. Yeah, they eventually would be. Some of them would wind up in the CIA. Some of them didn't. This guy I interviewed in Dublin. His name was Fenn, Fenn. He was. There was another guy in Michigan. This is all during the 50th anniversary of World War II because there were millions of World War II veterans still alive at that time. And one of the things I saw was, for example, I interviewed Steve Ambrose. Now, Steve Ambrose, um, it's not well. Steve Ambrose at one point had sort of gone onto a hippie route in the late '60s. So he was when he wrote his book on Crazy Horse and Custer. He was off like taking peyote or LSD and things like that.
Oh my God.
And
Yeah.
then he straightened his ass out. And then he came in. And so he was doing this stuff he'd spent like 10 years. He had a head start on a lot of people because he started to do all these oral interviews with D-Day veterans. And it was sort of similar to the only thing I could compare it to in the United States that was similar to that was when Cornelius Ryan was able to persuade the owner of Reader's Digest to finance him. And so Cornelius Ryan had the most, I mean, it was amazing. He was a well-funded, popular military historian. The guy had been a journalist in the Second World War, Irish, and he had interviewed all these different people who had experienced D-Day, French, British, Americans, Canadians, Germans, uh, and he had this huge oral history, and document collection, which led to him producing the book The Longest Day. And all that stuff is, I think, it's in an archive. I think it's digitized. It's out in Miami University in Ohio, I think. That's where the papers are. Um, and then he did his book on the Battle of Berlin, and then he did a book on, and there's some guy. There's a famous story about that. But all these big oral history compilations, Ambrose was ahead of the game after basically Cornelius Ryan had established that as a functioning model to produce a best-selling book. And Ambrose's book on D-Day was an interesting book, but it was again,
Yeah.
I think, overplayed the American angle. And well, he did do a book on Pegasus Bridge. That was a book on the actual glider attack by Major Howard against the bridge on the Orne River.
Yeah,
Um,
I went to a presentation that Major Howard wrote did. He did a presentation to us, and he was an interesting guy. He was a policeman. He'd been a policeman, and
he was.
when his glider landed near the Pegasus Bridge with a big bang, that came down, and he couldn't see. And he thought, how can I lead this mission? Now, this is him talking. How can I lead this mission and I can't see? And then he realized the impact when they hit, the helmet had come down over his face and it blocked his eyes. So he got that squared away. And then he went on to secure the bridges.
Yeah, yeah. I have no, I have a good interview with Howard. I did that back in 90. I think he was still alive in 93 or
Yeah.
94.
Yeah.
Uh, and Howard was quite interesting, very nice man. He gave me a lot of his time. He wanted me to, like he wanted me to mention his military unit. I think I think the Oxford Bucks and something light infantry or something like that. But, uh, but quite a nice guy. Um,
He'd been
and
a policeman. He'd been a
I,
British
yeah,
policeman.
that year, when you mentioned that, I remember that about him
Yeah.
because,
Yeah,
uh,
he came to the United States, and he gave this speech at the Eisenhower, where Eisenhower is buried in Kansas,
oh, wow, interesting.
and assembled a bunch of veterans. And he was not a young man, but he seemed to be in pretty good shape, and he gave his little version of that.
Well, the one memorable,
Excuse me a minute. I've
yeah,
got to go to the door.
gotcha. So Alex is going to join us, Kenny. Alex is going to join us, you said? All right. Um,
I muted myself because I didn't want some sounds to come through. Yeah, he said he was, but he's given me three things and I got a fourth thing. So you tell me which one of these four you would want to do, and let me tell you what they are. They
well,
are,
what did you want to do? What kind of
oh,
stuff?
I don't know. I'm interested in this the
What?
elimination of the Venezuelan gangs sent to El
Oh, yeah,
Salvador.
yeah. I think that's interesting to talk about. Yeah, we could start with that.
Okay, and let me just I think that was Alex knocking on the door. So let me just let him
Now,
in.
also, I'm expanding and letting more people know, like Tom's coming in, but so we're getting to the point where we actually, one could sort of behave oneself. Like if we go off on when you and I start cursing, or I start cursing Trump out, I don't have to necessarily do that anymore.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
I've been
yeah.
meaning to say something to you about that.
Okay. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's hard to restrain myself.
I know it, but you don't want to end up like some people have, you
Yeah,
know,
I know. Well,
down
I
in
must.
Guantanamo Bay in the dry
That's
on the
right.
dry
Well,
Tortugas or
I
something.
must admit them taking down Ira Hayes from the DoD website. That is a little too much. I mean, I find, because those kind of things really kill me when they do stuff like that. When I was a kid, uh, my father at Fort Belvoir, he used to have me. There was a black sergeant who would act as a babysitter for me, right? And this
Yeah,
guy was a real character. He fought in the Second World War. He fought in Korea. He was a nice guy, and he'd sit there and start telling me things and watching TV with me when I was being babysitted, and I always got a big kick out of the guy. It was sort of fun to do. But anyway, so I find all these attacks, like the way they use DEI, as far as I'm concerned, it's a new way to say the N word,
Yeah.
and I just and I just find it really offensive.
Okay, yes. All right. Well, congratulations. You have feelings. Okay, so let me start.
Okay.
Let me play this one thing here. Alex, we're going to play this first, then we'll go to your three. Let me see if that comes up. I guess you can see it, right?
yeah.
You see it? And then if I go full screen here, and let's see, there comes the sound.
Marco Rubio.
Come back here.
Welcome back in live now from Fox. I am Andy Mack. Earlier this weekend, some 250 Venezuelans, alleged members of the MS-13 and Tren de Aragua gangs, were sent back to El Salvador after a U.S. federal judge ordered to temporarily halt the removals and turn back any planes carrying the deportees. I want to put up a post from Secretary of State Marco Rubio about this developing story, saying, "We have sent two dangerous top MS-13 leaders plus 21 of its most wanted back to face justice in El Salvador. Also, as promised by the President of the United States, we sent over 250 alien enemy members of Tren de Aragua, which El Salvador has agreed to hold in their very good jails at a fair price that will also save our taxpayer dollars." The president there in El Salvador is not only the strongest security leader in our region, he's also a great friend of the U.S. Thank you. Of course, the president of El Salvador posting this, saying today the first 238 members of the Venezuelan criminal organization Tren de Aragua arrived in the country. They were immediately transferred to the terrorism confinement center for a period of 1 year. The United States will pay a very low fee for them, but a high one for us. On this occasion, the U.S. has also sent us 23 MS-13 members wanted by the justice system there, including two ringleaders. One of them is a member of the criminal organization's highest structure. This will help us finalize intelligence gathering and go after the last remnants of MS-13, including its former and new members' money, weapons, drugs, hideouts, collaborators, and sponsors. As always, we continue in advancing the fight against organized crime, but this time we're also helping our allies, making our prison system self-sustainable, obtaining vital intelligence to make our country an even safer place, all in a single action. May God bless El Salvador, and may God bless the United States of America. Of course, this happens as on Saturday, President Trump, he invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to deport alleged gang members. The law, which has been enacted only 3 times in U.S. history, grants the president authority to deport non-citizens without appearing before a judge, among other wartime authorities. Shortly after, though, a federal judge ordered to temporarily halt it. Of course, we're talking about the U.S. and El Salvador. They reached an agreement last month where the U.S. will pay the country $6 million to hold around 300 gang members in its notorious prison. Of course, later on Sunday, President Trump posted on Truth Social thanking the president of El Salvador for this, saying thank you to El Salvador, in particular the president, for your understanding of this horrible situation, which was allowed to happen to the United States because of the incompetent Democratic leadership. We will not forget. So that is the latest on this as we continue to follow as Secretary of State Marco Rubio also putting out that statement.
I'm about to cash this check for.
Okay, that's enough of that.
Go
Let me
ahead.
make sure this turns off. So anyhow, that's enough of that. You got the story. I didn't get quite, did they send us back some sensitive people from MS-13 that we could prosecute in the States? Was that what they were saying? We sent them 200 and they sent us back some people that we wanted to extradite. Did you get that in that video? Anybody pick that up? No? Okay.
Mm.
All right. So what do you think of this? You think this is gangbusters, right?
Well, El Salvador is probably the least consequential country in Latin America, quite
Yeah.
frankly. You know, I've been there, and it's there's nothing to it. You know,
It's not significant in terms of
country the US
population or GDP.
I don't think it is.
These are countries the U.S. can push around. That's why they're accepting. And maybe they got
Well,
the rule
we had
there. It's right-wing oligarchy and you have the military who currently run the country. But their economy is not like a lot of Latin America.
You seem to be omitting a major factor that everybody in the U.S. knows about the recent history in El Salvador. They were #1 per capita murder capital in the world. And this new guy took over. He was elected. He wasn't a coup. And within a couple of months, he just arrested everybody who had tattoos. And he's got like, I don't know, was it 60,000 or something number in that range in jail permanently in stiff conditions. And the murder rate went to 0. So he had absolute support from the population, absolute support.
Mhm.
So that's the significance of the place. I mean, that's been in the media. I mean, you could talk about right wing, left wing, whatever. But if you support the gangs, fine.
People
You support
always
the
point out,
gangs?
Stalinist Russia had a very low murder rate too, because everybody was in the gulag. So there's not necessarily a good thing.
Do you think that these weren't gang members? That wasn't
Some
the
of
highest
them,
murder
but
rate?
I think it's pretty clear that they also snapped up like members of the opposition. They always use this excuse. I'm sure that there are members of labor unions that the government didn't like, that they just jailed.
Well, that's conjecture. There hasn't been any report to that effect.
I haven't.
I heard that President Trump likes to blow bubbles on naked donkeys, but it's just conjecture. I don't have any evidence of it. So you say that they arrested union members. Okay, where'd you hear that? So whatever. So but anyhow, what do you think about the point being the rule was 1787? That you can deport people who are here for malicious intent. And some people were saying that's only if there was a war, but somebody read it. And what I heard, it was a war or people here to cause trouble, to paraphrase it. If somebody came here on visas or whatever thing they came in, but they in addition to being in school or whatever, being a tourist, they also fomented vandalous riots or robbing banks or anything that would be not optimum for the country, then I guess it's the State Department could revoke their permits or visas and send them back. Doesn't have to be a war going on. In fact, at the time it was written and it was implemented, there was, in fact, they say it was implemented 3 times, but there was no war going on. There was military action, but no war declared by the House or the Senate. So, nothing to stand on. It sounds like the president could do that. What do you think?
The Times has an article about this.
Yeah, but what do you think? Forget the Times.
No, because they show this is not something new. This is something, again, like you were saying here, this is from something the government has been doing to their own prisoners. This is in El Salvador, last 2023.
Oh, yeah, so there's your evidence. That's right.
This is obviously designed to humiliate.
Wait a minute, Alex, zoom in. Alex, zoom in.
Yeah, tattoos. People
can't you zoom in?
Get tattoos, yeah. Because you have to join a gang often to basically, survive. So you're not, so you don't become.
Okay, yeah. That's remarkable. Sympathy for the devil.
Okay, you want to spend a little time at Rikers, Ken? You could literally get killed there, considering how many people they've died there in the past, 5 years or so. You want to, turn yourself into the California, go commit a crime, see how fun it is to be, in our U.S. prison system.
Do you want to eliminate
If
it?
you think it's so easy, yeah,
Wait a second, wait a minute.
go commit a felony, go try and rob a store, or see what happens to you. See how you like it.
Wait,
You
wait.
can have fun. It'll be fun for you, I'm sure.
Okay, you want empathy for the people in the American
Yes.
prison system. Now, are you comparing the American prison system to the El Salvadoran prison system?
Actually, the El Salvador system is one of the few systems in the world that's probably worse.
You think it's worse? Okay.
Well, it depends what you had. I don't think actually they kill as many people there.
Would you say? Well, I don't want to get us in a bipolar thing between me and you, or by the dichotomy. But are you in favor of anarchy over law and order?
I'm afraid in what I would want is something like what you have in the Scandinavian countries, where it actually is about rehabilitation. There's no such thing as a life sentence, even for the Breivik guy. He has a 40-year sentence or something.
I know a very good travel agency on 14th Street to get you tickets right away. If you really like it better.
Well, again,
I don't know. I've seen on 60 Minutes about the wonders of what happens in Sweden or Norway or Scandinavia or anywhere. But that's not going on now. They've had an increase in murder and rape. That's outrageous in Sweden.
Yeah, that's still much less than in the United States. So
you think?
Yes. Yeah.
The rate of increase.
No European country has the same murder rate as the US. They're all
really?
Well, I'm quite sure that they're all lower than the US, because the US has one of the highest in the planet.
Okay, again, there's that travel agency on 14th Street. He can send you right over there. They might like you. I don't know. They might not like you.
Again, like I said, Ken, I'll go if you'll again commit a felony and see how much you enjoy the US prison system.
It's not, you never go to jail for,
no.
You do not go to jail for committing a crime. You go to jail for getting caught. That's the crime.
So you're going to admit to crimes on the show tonight, Ken?
No. Take a look. What do you think of Donald Trump? Did he get caught? Did they get him in a jail cell?
Not in a jail cell, but he's
okay. What do you think about like all of the criminal crimes you accuse everybody of committing in the political office? They don't get caught. They don't go to jail.
Well,
anyhow, let's get Jim. What do you think about?
Caught, you don't go to jail like our own
Jim. Let's take
Mayor Adams.
yeah. Let's not get into all of that philosophical stuff. Jim or Tom, what do you think about the U.S. arrangement of outsourcing prison to another country? That's a radical idea, isn't it?
I think it is. Yeah.
You think it's a dangerous precedent?
Yeah. I don't think it's a good idea. We've got a lot of wide open spaces where we can, prisons that we can put people in.
Right.
I was at Fort Leavenworth for quite a while. We had a lot of people in jail there. At Leavenworth, Kansas, it's got the federal prison, the state prison, the army prison, the women's prison, the juvenile prison. Kansas has got more jails because when the time that they were getting ready, the government offered Leavenworth, Kansas, to be the capital of Kansas, and they said no, they'd rather have the prisons because of the jobs, and so the jails didn't go there. They went someplace else in Kansas.
What was your position there? Were you just a tourist or working?
Oh no, I was stationed there for several years. I worked there in the army. Yeah.
Well, of those prisons you mentioned, about 5 or 6, do you know whether any of them were redemptive, like they were positive for the inmates, got them recovered?
No, I don't know that. No, no,
You don't
no.
know.
I don't know that. I just remember every once in a while something would pop up, like one day there was one of the wives shopping in the commissary, and they used to use prison soldiers for a lot of manual labor at Fort Leavenworth. And she saw this soldier that was packing groceries, and she completely lost it because he was the guy that had murdered her two children in Germany. He was a lifer, and they sent him to Leavenworth, and they let him out to do groceries. And boy, that was embarrassing as hell. I mean, she just totally lost it when she saw that. And of course, a lot of people lost it too because they'd put him in a job like that where he was out with people.
What, last time we talked, Tom, you told me about you were staying, I forget what, I think it may have been Washington State, where they had World War II POWs from Germany,
Oh, they had
and
him here at Fort Lewis. Yeah, oh yeah, they had him at Fort Lewis. Yeah,
likewise they let them go out on the weekend. Some of
I
them.
don't know that not here. It was Canada. Was the one where they were working on wheat farms, and the guy told me that if they were good prisoners, they could go to town on Wednesday night and see a movie, and
Well, that
things
was
like
in
that.
Canada, huh?
That was up in Canada. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, no, we had German prisoners here, but they were pretty much under control.
So
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
And
Jim,
Italian. We had Italian prisoners too.
Jim, you're maintaining your schedule with the parole officer, aren't you? What do you think about this idea, this new invention of outsourcing? Instead of getting the cars, parts made in foreign countries, going down and sending the troops down, the prisoners down to El Salvador. I think it's a combination because he wanted to deport them and imprison them. So because it'd be a big burden to imprison them. It's expensive, 60, 70, 60 to $80,000 a year per prisoner just to
Well,
keep them
okay.
in a cell here.
All right. Well, first of all, this is there's many dimensions of this whole thing going on at the same time.
Go ahead.
First of all, for him to invoke the Alien Sedition Act is quite significant. That act, historically, came into being as a result of conflict between the United States and revolutionary France in the period of the Revolutionary Wars from 1789 up to when Napoleon takes power. And what occurred in that situation was that Adams had was the president at the time. He succeeded George Washington, and he sent a negotiating team to Paris, basically to negotiate a settlement with the French because the French were raiding American shipping at the time. And at that meeting in Paris, the French demanded financial bribes, basically, from the United States before they would even begin negotiations. So the Americans broke off negotiations. Uh, President Adams went to Congress and asked for a defense spending to build a navy or expand the navy, to create an army, etc. And already there'd been a reiteration of the Continental Army, but that had been marked by a decisive defeat by Native Americans out in the old Northwest, and then there was a resuscitation of it led by Anthony Wayne. But this was when they really wanted to. They were facing the possibility of going to war with France. So that created a whole wave of anti-French opinion in the United States. And I know Alex is a specialist on the Napoleonic War, so maybe he can chime into this. And that led to the whole question of back and forth attacks by the Republican Party. The Republican Party at that time was sort of a more they were more aligned with the French Revolution as opposed to the Federalists. And the Federalists,
Jefferson,
pardon me,
especially.
yeah, Jefferson,
Jefferson, especially. Jefferson
Jefferson,
especially was
Je-
very pro-French and
well,
very
he'd been
enamored
the
of the
ambassador.
revolutionary ideals.
He'd been the ambassador in France. So there was a reaction over the expression of the ideas that they were, and this is where you had a serious First Amendment crisis in the United States historically. So the Federalists proposed the Alien and Sedition Acts, laws, and basically they wanted greater control over immigration, and they wanted to punish people who were publishing criticisms of the government. And in response, the Republicans deemed the Sedition Act as unconstitutional. So, uh, in that period of time, the United States prosecuted several people under this new law. And that included a congressman in Vermont and various Republican printers, people who were either newspaper people or printing, pamphlets attacking the Federalists. And that led to a huge reaction politically, which helped Thomas Jefferson win the 1800 election against Adams. And that was an election, by the way, that's notorious in American history because that's an election where Jefferson was being attacked. That's when they brought up the whole relationship of Jefferson with that slave that he was screwing for years, and they accused him of miscegenation and all this other stuff. But that's the alien sedition laws and acts come at that period of time. Now, so they give a tremendous power to the executive branch because, as I say, they were using it to attack the press. They were attacking congressmen who they deemed as being too cozy with the French. And at that point in time, there was another. I forget if the Pinckney affair was before that. Yeah, I think the Pinckney affair was before that. But they actually they ordered out of the country the French ambassador. I thought that was before this period, but certainly this is, and it's marked. And we were actually in combat with the French Navy in the Caribbean. One of the things that George Washington did, which I always bring up because some people never talk about that, and we lost Alex for some reason, is
Yeah.
that the Washington decided to give military aid to the Haitian rebellion in led by Toussaint Louverture, which I remember. I actually have the documents about that because I would talk with black Haitian friends of mine. I said, "Oh, Jim, I never heard that shit before." I said, "Yeah, here, check this out." So, but it was a purely self-interested motive on the part of Washington to support a black slave rebellion because they were against the French government that they thought they were going to war with. So that's the backdrop to that. Now it's invoked several times throughout our history, including the Second World War. And I believe, and that was considered part of the justification for the internment of the Japanese Americans during the Second World War. I think it was invoked during the First World War too. Now it is invoked to justify the forced, deportation, the sending of these gang members, quote, and I said in quotes, down to El Salvador. Now, the judge, Boasberger, ordered, as you know, he ordered the planes to turn in midstream, and basically the response of, I think, Levitt, the woman down there, as a spokesperson, or someone in Congress said, "Well, where's a judge have the power to, stop the federal government?" And um, and so that and then they brought back a case of this actually happening during the civil rights period. This is so we're dealing with a situation that will rapidly head. And then over the weekend, Trump called for this guy to be impeached. Um, I think they had some hearings today about this. They're trying to determine. I think as we're going on here, I think today they probably had a hearing today about the timeline of the judge issuing the order to the planes to turn back, and Trump basically say, whoever decided to make the decision, just okay, we're gonna export these guys down to El Salvador regardless. Now, the question becomes, okay, what's the evidence against them? Is there indeed evidence? And what's the legality of doing this? And so they're claiming a power that usurps, as I understand, and I haven't read the actual legal documents, which I will, but the press, and I'll view that as sort of a secondary source until I read the legal documents. They're asserting that they're violating normal procedures that occur with when you arrest somebody for being undocumented. They're saying let's not go through any legal process. Let's just get these guys out of here by saying that they are members of this gang, which in some cases we've actually seen people in Colorado say that they were just swept up, that they are quote just innocents in the sense that they're just undocumented and they happen to be Venezuelan. Now, so that's what's going on with that. Now, the issue you raise about this guy in charge of El Salvador is very interesting because this guy Bukele, I believe his name is, he was the mayor of San Salvador. He used to be a supporter of the FM. He used to be a supporter of the guerrilla movement that seized power, the FMLN, and he had a big split with them. And he decided to run for president. Now, you're right, Kenny, about the fact that it has, you got MS-13 there, and look, we live up here in the New York City area. I had to work with a contracting company 2 years ago that was all the guys were from El Salvador. They were great. They were just working guys. They were a cleanup crew that was brought in by a storage company that I had a lot of books in, which unfortunately I lost a lot of them. And they were brought in to clean up the flood that occurred near where I live. Knocked out the entire basement of that thing. And these guys were all nice people in terms of them being gang. I would be very hard for me to imagine that. But the MS-13 thing is indeed a serious threat. And you're right about the homicide rate being one of the highest in the Western Hemisphere down in El Salvador. And so what has he done? He set up something called a territorial control plan, which was his. It's a big plan to essentially completely disrupt the gangs in El Salvador. Both MS-13 and they have another gang there called the 18th Street Gang. These are the largest gangs. These gangs are integrated into Los Angeles, as you know. They stem from the prison system and the drug trades and whatever Salvadorian refugees are doing up in the Los Angeles area. And then they also include Mexican immigrants, the 18th Street Gang. So this whole plan is being implemented across the country for the past few years. And it has different phases where they're basically going to order and incarcerate large numbers of these gang members. So that indeed has brought down the homicide rate by about 2/3. Okay, I think even more. It's knocked it down to oh more than 2/3. It's knocked it down from probably 20 times. Okay, so one can see it's a quote success. However, the relationship with Trump is quite interesting. How does this happen? How did Bukele start to have this relationship with Trump? And there's one aspect of this that's not really discussed. He also has declared a Bitcoin capital down there in El Salvador. So Bukele and because if one will note, just I think about a couple of weeks ago, there was some big statement by the Trump administration about Bitcoin. And so it does indeed benefit Bukele financially that this Trump policy about Bitcoin was announced in general, and it's a really interesting question because here he's using these countries, and he also Bukele was very much against Biden. He supports the Russians in the invasion of Ukraine. Um, he actually met with Trump during the first presidency and worked out relations with him where, he could basically uh, he basically allow prisoners to come down. But he was very angry that the Biden administration attacked him on human rights grounds. So right now, in this second administration of Trump, they are considered allies. And Rubio is in February asked, basically, Bukele offered Rubio to accept non-Salvadorian deportees from the United States into El Salvador, and including convicted American prisoners. So this is pretty crazy shit. And this is going to push the look at what Roberts said over the weekend. Roberts said this, he basically politely answered the request of Trump to impeach this Judge Boasberger, who turns out to be the head of the federal circuit. And Roberts sort of said, well, he sort of milk toasted it, but he sort of indicated that he's not cool with such an extreme act. He sort of said, let the legal process work out. So this is the kind of stuff I don't think anyone could not argue that we're heading towards a serious issue, which will be determined one way or the other by the Supreme Court. And even if the Supreme Court rules against Trump, he'll ignore them. He'll ignore them. And so that's the kind of situation we're in with these things. And yes, if some guys are MS-19 or all this stuff, I have no sympathy for those kind of dudes, okay? None. But what I do have a real reaction to is Trump deciding to invoke the Alien Sedition Act, which means that he is thinking seriously about invoking other acts that give the presidency extraordinary emergency powers that could then be directed against regular American citizens if he doesn't like what they have to say. So we're in an interesting mess right here.
Ken, you're muted.
Kenny.
Mike, I'm really interested in your viewpoint, but I want you to try and beat Jim Dingman and keep it less than 5 minutes. Mike, what do you think about this U.S. sending these Venezuelan prisoners to El Salvador, outsourcing penal justice? Is that right? Does that sound perverted, penal justice? Putting them in penal, outsourcing penal attendance, putting people in a jail in another country.
Still sounds bad.
I know.
And by the way, I could beat out Jim by doing it under 20 minutes.
Okay.
But I'll try to keep it under 5. First of all, I don't know if you examined, excuse me.
Yeah, hold on a second. Hold on a second, Michael. That is a ridiculous challenge, Kenny, because Michael can beat me by a mile. Go on.
Okay.
Go on, Michael.
No, I mean, he's got to come in first. He's got to run a faster race, not a longer race.
But we're not going to be on till after midnight. So
okay, go ahead, Michael.
I can't possibly beat you tonight. Anyway, what we should be looking at, I don't know if you examined it, but this professor who was teaching at a university here from Lebanon, who was deported, the judge ordered that her deportation be stayed, and they deported her anyway. I think the timeline was pretty clear, where the plane wasn't in midair when the ruling came down. The ruling came down, and then they deported her anyway.
Right.
So what we have here is what Levitt, the
press secretary,
accidentally said. She accidentally made a slight error in speaking and said, "We will continue our fight against law and order."
Right.
And so
you bring up a very, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's a very interesting thing. The Supreme Court said that the president cannot be found guilty of a crime from anything he does along his normal duties. So even if he refuses to follow the orders of some dude who's a federal judge and I think there's about 1,000 in the US, any one of them could come across a case and say, no, I don't like what the president done. He's not allowed to do that. So anyhow, so if he doesn't
Well,
follow
they're
that
judges,
judicial
so
order,
they're allowed to do
it's a
that.
misdemeanor or it's a felony, but it doesn't matter. They can't prosecute him.
Well, there's the rub, because when the Supreme Court made that decision, which is
Yeah.
probably one of the, if not the worst decision, well, certainly the worst decision since Plessy Ferguson or Dred Scott or anything like that. Certainly the worst decision of the last 100 years.
It's well, it's where the one about people, corporations or people. That's one of the worst.
Well, this one was worse,
This is worse.
to be quite honest, because what they basically said is that the president can't be prosecuted for anything that was in the pursuance of his duties,
Right.
but or the pursuant of his activities as president.
Yeah.
But then there's the problem. If he's pursuing not his duties, but if he's going against his duties as a president, in other words, if he, instead of enforcing the law, is breaking it, if he's not enforcing the decisions of the Supreme Court, but rather going against the decision of the Supreme Court, is that something he can be prosecuted for? Because that is not in pursuance of his presidential duties. I'm not saying that's how they worded it in the Supreme Court decision. Supreme Court decision was worded terribly, in my opinion. But the fact of the matter is, he is not doing what he is supposed to do as president. He is doing something counter to what he's supposed to be doing as president. So
You mean he's supposed to be keeping the gang members out of jail or something? I don't understand.
No. He's supposed to be
making sure illegal aliens are allowed to stay in the country no matter what.
Well, that's the kind of thinking that will eliminate eliminate the entire concept of the United States of America. You can't start thinking the purpose of the Supreme Court is not to say oh God, these are bad people, we got to get rid of them. They're supposed to be interpreting and making decisions based on the Constitution, which is really the heart and head of the United States of America. All right, without the Constitution, we're not the United States of America as it was designed to be, or it's supposed to be, or that we've been living in for all of our lives and the lives of our grandparents before them. So the idea is that he's running counter to the dictates of the United States of America, in particular the Constitution. Once he does that, we have what is known as a constitutional crisis.
Okay, but not, I think it's a little bit better if I just keep you controlled on this. So the point is that the real topic is, what do you think about the idea of outsourcing penal obligations to another country?
Was that
just in general, right or wrong?
Wait, was that the original topic that was brought up?
Yeah, that's what the report is. The shocking thing of sending, like the announcer said, that some of the prisoners could be American citizens. They don't have to be illegal aliens. He could still send him. He's operating it. He's made a deal with El Salvador that he can send any prisoner down to El Salvador, and they'll pay. The U.S. will pay him to stay there, and it's cheaper than keeping him here. So he's outsourcing it.
Again,
is that okay?
No,
that's step one.
There's something in the Constitution, which I can't think of offhand, unfortunately, which would prevent that. But the idea is what he's basically, in other words, when you're outsourcing punishment, servitude to another country, under those countries' dictates, in their prison, under how they run their prisons and what they do to their prisoners, etc. And we're saying we're sending our prisoners outside of it. That's a denial of the prisoner's rights. Now, if what you're doing is you're taking away the prisoner's citizenship. Once you take away the prisoner's citizenship, you can deport him, wherever you want, I guess, or wherever they supposedly came from, if they came from
So it
anywhere.
might be legal if they're illegal, if they're not citizens, but you don't think it's legal if they are citizens.
What do you ask? No, I'm saying that I'm not talking about right or wrong or anything. I'm talking about the fact is, if somebody's a citizen of the United States and
Yeah.
you send them to another country where they are subject, you send them to another country to be subject to the laws and punishment of that country as that country deems fit, then you are essentially stripping them of their rights as an American citizen.
Yeah, but that's what's extraditing people. We have extradition agreements with a lot of countries.
Extradition doesn't have to do necessarily with American citizens. But
it might.
If an American citizen commits an act of treason, let's say, against the United States, let's say he spies for a foreign power or something like that, you could theoretically extradite him with the prisoner's permission, so to speak, if they want to be. But theoretically, if the prisoner says no, I want to be, serve my term for the rest of my life in the United States, or be executed in the United States, they should have that right to do that. The fact of the matter is, when a person goes to prison, are they stripped of their citizenship? That's the question.
Okay, good. So
let's convicted of a crime, convicted of a crime, not charged, but convicted of a crime, then you have to say to yourself, certain rights of citizenship there are removed. They can't vote. But the fact is, are you stripping them of their citizenship? Because if you're not stripping them of their citizenship, you can't send them to another country to be at the beck and call at the under the thumb of that country without the United States intervening at all.
Well, if they don't have any status, not even temporary visas or anything, they're just illegal or undocumented.
Okay, now you're talking about people who aren't citizens, but they're still entitled to.
They are.
Rights
the Supreme Court has
Go ahead.
held.
Let's go. Go ahead, Alex.
That non-citizens have almost, well, with a few exceptions, the same rights. I mean, for example, it's not like non-citizens. The Miranda rights and so other basic human rights. Anybody has them, whether a citizen or not. And of course, this, if you say this is okay, this is being able to send your enemies to another country, or dissenting Americans, or residents, non-citizens. This is potential for tremendous abuse. By an authoritarian or totalitarian government. And it's, in fact, again, these kind of steps are the steps along the path to very horrible things.
And one other thing. Let me just say one other thing.
Go ahead. Back to Mike.
If you've lived here all your life, and they say, well, we're going to send you back to your country of origin. Your country of origin is the United States. So you can't send that person. So I'm talking about, let's say you're a dreamer. I mean, the official, the word, the dreamer, people here under the Dreamer Act. In other words, their parents were not born in the United States or came here illegally, but the kids were. Well, you can't send.
No. Dreamers are children, people who were brought here when they were 5 years old. They were born outside, but they've been here since they were 5 or 6.
Not according to the Trump administration.
Well,
if their parents weren't born here,
that's different.
Their parents came here illegally.
He wants to cancel a birthright citizenship. That's a different issue.
Dreamers
by definition under Obama were brought here prepubescent, under 12, and they grew up here, and they've been here for 20, 30 years, and they're running a grocery store, but they were not born in the U.S. They're dreamers.
Even so, let's go with that. Even so, the idea is the only country, the country in which they were raised, the country, the language they speak, you're going to send them back to their country of origin. So in
Yeah,
other
that's
words,
not so bad. Mexico's good. A lot of people go down there for vacation.
but the fact is, the
Right?
you know
Hey, let's
something,
go to Cancun over the weekend. Come on.
you ask question, you ask me a question in
Yeah.
legal terms, right? And then you
Yeah.
want to put on this kind of like mundane, ridiculous. Well,
That's right.
yeah, okay.
Okay, I'm
Really,
sorry. That's right. That was a cheap shot.
at,
I don't
at,
know anybody who still wants to go to Cancun. They're all going to Turcos something. Turkish.
and no, actually, a lot of Canadians are going there because they don't want to go to the United States. And
Right.
God bless them. But
God
the
bless
idea
them.
is, yeah, because I agree with them 100%.
So no, my main question is there's several issues here, but the main thing is what do you think about just concept, whatever kind of turkey it is you're putting in the oven? What about outsourcing the incarceration to a
You
third
don't
world, to
outsource
a Turkey?
incarceration to another country
You don't
unless
think
you
it's a good
are in charge,
idea?
unless you are in charge of those prisons. In other words, if the United States is running those prisons and they're
Like
told,
Guantanamo Bay.
hey, let me finish the sentence.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, okay, all right. You mentioned Guantanamo Bay. Fine. I don't think that's prisons run very well. But the idea is, yeah, it's run by the United States. If the United States is running the prisons under United States law, not under the laws of the prison they're running or outside of United States law, if they're running the prisons according to U.S. law, U.S. laws, and U.S. regulations, then you could say that's fine. But that's not what they're doing. I don't think that's what they're proposing. They're saying get rid of them, throw them to some other country, and let that other country deal with them however they want. And if that's the case, no good. No,
Even if they're illegal
no good.
aliens, no good.
If you're going if you're charging with them with something under American law, why are you going to have them punished for it under somebody else's law?
Because they're illegal. They're not Americans. They're illegal aliens.
If you're illegal aliens and you're deporting them, what are the reasons you're deporting them? And by the way, that's deportation. What are the reasons?
Because they didn't enter the country legally.
They didn't enter the country legally. Okay. So
That's
you're
the crime.
deporting. All right. Now, let me bring up one other issue. You know anybody who came to this country legally?
Yeah, most of the people that worked on my roof or cleaned the house or made the hamburger, they're all over the place.
How long did it take them to get in?
Usually a third of their lifetime.
Right.
I mean, in terms of becoming citizens, it takes them, 10, 20 years.
And it could take a couple of years before they can get a green card. And if they're outside the country, it could take several years before they can get a green card. As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
it is not easy. It is very difficult to come into
this. It's a tough world.
It's a tough world, but it's very difficult to come to this country legally. Now, if somebody is under pressure so that their lives depend on getting out of that country fast, or they cannot feed their kids in that country. In other words, there is a time element. Then they cannot, and not only that, the Trump administration is cutting back federal agencies and cutting back staff. So it's even going to get harder to come into the United States.
But I mean, I did see a statistic that 90% of the cases which went before a court in terms of seeking refugee status because of a threatening condition in the country they're leaving, 90% of them are refused.
Well, there you go.
They just say, oh, my brother-in-law said he was going to spit on me, I need help.
No, they refused. They didn't say, I mean, I don't think those statistics you saw said they proved beyond a reasonable doubt that their plight was
right. They didn't win in court that they were legitimate refugees. 90%.
90% of them that went into court didn't win in court. They were legitimate refugees. Well, what it means is this country, that the fellow in France who said we want to take back the Statue of Liberty was totally right. Take it back,
okay.
because it doesn't mean what it says on the bottom.
No, that was written by a poet like 5, 10 years after the statue was put up, and had nothing to do with the French government. It's just a poet, whatever her name was, Ezra or
It's a
something.
poet who's the words of that poet.
Yeah, you took to heart. You agree with it. It's wonderful, but it's
That's
not
right.
U.S. policy. It's not in the
Wait a second, hold it.
Constitution.
That is what the people.
It's not legal. It's not legality.
But it is the spirit. It is what the United States decided the spirit of the United States was.
No, nobody ever decided that legally. That's like a guy who got up and said, everybody contributes according to their abilities, and everybody receives according to their needs. And that's what we should live by.
So basically what you're saying there is that what's written on the bottom of the of the Statue of Liberty has nothing to do with the United States.
Right. It's not legal.
It's not what the United States is about.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. The Dodgers, the American way of life is a nebulous thing defined of diligence, hope, effort, optimism, fairness, all kinds of concepts that are not in any legal document.
So what you're saying is that the words, Emma Lazarus's words,
Emma
on the
Lazarus,
Statue of Liberty,
yeah,
on the Statue of Liberty, are just that they're of no meaning
poem.
as far as the United States goes, United States of America. They have
well, I liked one of my favorite things is the lyrics from what's it called? Something for the Devil by the Rolling Stones,
Okay, well, I doubt they're going to replace Emma Lazarus with that. But the fact is that what you're saying is Emma Lazarus's words don't mean anything as far as the United States goes. They're
legally,
nice legally, or what the United States is trying to do. Remember, I mean, in laws that we're trying to pass, in laws that we want to keep. In other words, they do not reflect the viewpoint of the United States of America. We are not welcoming to immigrants. And by the way, in the 1930s, we were not welcoming to immigrants, to refugees.
Right.
To refugees who were in danger of being killed by the Nazis.
Yeah.
We were not that welcoming. We were limited. So if that's the America that you want to have.
Oh, come on. Where's the violins? Cut it out.
Hey, wait a second, buddy.
God bless America, land that I love. Come on.
You know something?
Wrap yourself in the flag.
Well, better me than that moron in the White House. The idea is that what I'm trying to say is you asked my opinion about something.
Oh, no. An opinion is good. That's fine.
Well, but then I'm saying that that is not the United States of America that I was raised in and that I was raised to believe in. Okay. Somebody who says, don't give me your tired or poor. Don't come here. Go, stay where you are. We don't want you. That's right. The United States of America that I was raised in, that I was raised to believe in. But you're right. If it's not ensconced in law, but then again, law is obviously something, just a useful tool to this administration. So in other words, if you're going to talk about law, then what 90% of what this administration is doing is suspect. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, no, we're going to stick exactly to the law, except when the law doesn't suit us.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. So anyhow, I've been chopping people up. Excuse me, I apologize. But Alex, I don't think you really responded completely to what you wanted to say regarding the use of outsourcing penal colonies to other countries, whether they're illegal or not illegal, or they're black, white, or Jewish, or Christian.
It doesn't matter if it's, you can argue about
even Stalin put people in his own
how's
gulags.
That different from sending prisoners to
gulag,
where Frank, to Australia or some other part of the world.
That's right.
Creating a prison colony or
Devil's Island.
Been done before.
The French got Devil's Island.
This is a great way to create a totalitarian state again.
But actually, if
get
I could
rid of
just
ship off your.
Alex, if I could just add to your point in one thing to strengthen it.
Go ahead.
Even
Go
in
ahead,
Australia,
Mike.
even in Australia, it was run by the British.
Yeah.
So this is worse than what was done in Australia.
And
Oh, you're right. Even
you're
Devil
being
Island
sent
was
to
run by the
prison in
French.
Australia. They didn't jail you when you got there.
Yeah,
you became a colonist.
but you weren't put under, some
Yeah.
other country's rule. Yeah,
Yeah,
this
that
is
too.
this is even more egregious. What we're going through now.
This has to be against some treaties. I'm sure that there's some, well, probably the basic human rights, the European, I'm sorry, the UN definition of human rights, I'm sure has something in there about, well, there's stuff in there about transferring populations. But also, jailing people without, due process, whatever that is in each country. But so this is, but
You know what? I thought
you
I
wanted
think
me to
yeah. I'll pull them up. I think the absolute irony of this would be if somehow President Donald Trump winds up in El Salvador in one of those prisons.
That would be something.
And they give him the tattoos and make him bend over just like that.
He wouldn't.
That would be
I don't think
funny.
he would last. He likes to think of himself as a tough guy, but I don't think he would last very long.
Okay, so you want to, Mike, Alex, you want to do Netanyahu or
Yeah. That's a good one.
Netanyahu, right? Okay.
All right. So this is.
I'm going to do it. Let me try it.
No, I got it.
All right, go ahead. But
so
blow
this
it
is
up
the Middle
and
East
make us
Eye.
sure the sound is good.
This is Daniel Levy, he's one of the founders of J Street, the left-wing Zionist political organization here in the U.S. He's head
You
of
mean
this
he's a political bigot?
He's you'll see again he's a definite critic of Netanyahu, but he's not an anti-Zionist anyway. But again, he's going to explain why why he thinks which is I think probably the right reason why Netanyahu broke the truce and what he's trying to
do. Okay, Alex, come on, let him talk. Okay. Let's hear what the guy has to say.
Shortly before the dawn prayer.
Louder, you see, it's not loud enough.
Shortly before families woke up to have their meal, to pray, and to start their fast for the 18th day of Ramadan. This was the moment when the ceasefire in Gaza was ruptured violently by the sound of Israeli airstrikes. They struck without warning, targeting makeshift displacement camps filled with children. At least 400 people have so far been killed. That includes at least 130 children. One of the bloodiest days in what has now widely been described as a genocide. Israel's government vows to continue escalating their military attacks, saying this is in response to Hamas's refusal to extend the ceasefire, which has been in place since January. But is this the real reason for this morning's attack? Or is there a much more cynical explanation? One tied simply to the political fate of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. To tell us more, we're joined by Daniel Levy, the president of the U.S. Middle East Project and a former Israeli peace negotiator. Daniel Levy, welcome to the show. I want to ask... Party, Jim Bob World Tour. I want to ask you to begin by describing your reaction to the news.
I think the timing was always a question. They weren't going to probably broadcast it in advance. The fact of this, I'm afraid, is unsurprising. This is the direction we've been going in. One thing I would say about the timing is, sure, element of surprise, but I think doing this at the time of Sahur, pre-dawn, time to eat during the month of Ramadan, I think that is in itself designed to further stir up tensions and passions. It's obviously killing people is the worst part of it, but the affront to religious sensitivities and sensibilities. What we have seen is a categorical and consistent Israeli refusal to actually do what it was committed to doing within the agreed framework. The framework for the ceasefire was on day 16. Negotiations were supposed to begin on phase 2, later phase 3. It says in the framework agreement that phase 2 includes the full Israeli military withdrawal, a full permanent ceasefire. Those negotiations never began in earnest because from the get-go, the Israeli government refuted the very terms of the agreement. On day 50, they were supposed to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor. That never happened. Instead, alongside the refusal to enter into the negotiations according to the agreed framework, we had the reimposition of siege on March 2nd, when they stopped the supplies going in. On March 12th, the cutting of electricity with the knock-on effect to water desalination, and overnight the strike on Gaza. And I think there were things to do with the domestic Israeli political scene, the political crisis Israel was in until this morning. It's not gone away, but it's been knocked off the headlines with Netanyahu's intention to fire the head of the Shin Bet. He's clashed with the Attorney General. Of course, he no longer has to appear in court over the next few days in his personal corruption trial. But I think the main thing that's been going on is that Netanyahu was testing the water in terms of what was his wiggle room with the Trump administration. Could he do this? And this defining moment, which I think led to the greatest anxiety on Team Netanyahu, was when we not only heard about Special Hostage Envoy Adam Boehler's talks with Hamas, but when he came out and defended those talks. That was just over a week ago. And he took to Israeli TV to defend those talks. Told some hard home truths, by the way. But since then, we've seen everything flow in the opposite direction. We've seen the Americans directly strike the Houthis in Yemen, directly strike Yemen, threaten Iran. Witkoff turn around and say, I'm abandoning the negotiated framework, which I brought into being and I was a guarantor of, by saying, yeah, Hamas accept the Israeli proposals or not, back to the lies, back to the deceit, and the disavowing of the direct track to Hamas. That's when Netanyahu realized he was back in the boss's seat as the president of the superpower, and Netanyahu was back on top with Trump as his supplicant.
I want to ask you about Trump and what is happening with the Trump administration, because it feels very confusing. There is mixed messaging. You mentioned the talks with Hamas that happened almost seemingly behind Israel's back. But let's start with Netanyahu himself, because as you mentioned, there's a lot going on politically in Israel right now. And all of it revolves around one man, and that is the Prime Minister of Israel.
Look at what's going on in the streets of Israel right now, in terms of the families of those still being held, some of those who were released in recent weeks, some of those who know that their loved ones are already deceased. They have come out and told the lie to this as well. They have come out and said, Netanyahu, you sabotaged this. You're the one that didn't conduct serious negotiations for a second phase. You've ended the ceasefire. You've endangered the hostages by resuming the war. The other thing that Israel has claimed, which is part of the deceit, is that they now are going after Hamas's civilian kind of Gaza governmental leadership. That's some of those. Obviously, the vast, overwhelming majority were civilians, children, as usual, back to committing the war crimes, which got us to where we are with the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. But some of those were the legal advisor, people who've been running some of the governmental affairs. And the lie there is that this is to prevent the resumption of Hamas governance. What we all know is that in the negotiations, Hamas has accepted that it will not be the governing party, but it will also not disarm and render itself non-existent in the context of continued belligerent, violent, illegal Israeli occupation. And so it's, and I'm sure the Western media will kind of do a he said, she said at best, but it's actually really transparent what has gone on.
We can speak about this from a political standpoint. We can speak about what's happening in the back rooms and in the negotiating table, but ultimately what the real story is what's happening on the ground. Of course, what's happening in Gaza, to the lives of the people that are shattered once again, the injured, the hospitals that are overflowing, this piece of land that has been denied humanitarian aid now for 2 weeks in the middle of Ramadan. But at the same time, there is a similar story. There's a similar group of people, as you mentioned, the hostage families, these people that have been waiting for 15 months for their loved ones to be returned, and now are being told that no, the ceasefire is on hold now and we're not negotiating anymore. Is there, I mean, how significant is that in the context of Israeli public opinion, in the context of a prime minister who is now potentially asking his country to return back to the deployments and the draft and the reservists and the war that may continue for the foreseeable future?
I just want to pick up on one of those, which is why the direct American channel to Hamas was so threatening to Netanyahu. Now, let's give credit to, I think he's now been taken off the file because of this, to the envoy, Adam Boehler. This is exactly what anyone should have done by now. I give credit, but we're also just acknowledging how enabling of this continued horror, how complicit and how incompetent and pathetic the previous administration, by the way, and everyone else who's not part of being in the room with Hamas to try and resolve this. But when Boehler was in the room, he clearly heard things that he had been told previously weren't real. He comes out and says, you have to talk to them. We could get a 5 to 10 year truce. The biggest threat to Netanyahu was himself being exposed.
Michael, I get it. He doesn't like Netanyahu, and it's all crap, and it's a lie. What is there anything there beyond that?
What Netanyahu is desperate not to, go to jail. He's
Alex, is your name Michael?
Yeah, sorry, I made a mistake. I meant to ask Alex if there was anything more to it. So, I mean, I get it. He doesn't like him. He's a criminal and it's genocide. I've heard this all before. And there is one question. Every time I hear this, when the U.S., Israel attacks somebody in Gaza, they only report the women and children being killed. I don't know why. Oh, it's 80% women and children, 90% women and children. Why the guys ran away? What happened? The population, by the way, let's say is 50-50 men and women, okay? And then children could be a male or a female. So if children are 30% of the population, then 50% and 30% is 80%. If you just indiscriminately bombed, 80% would be women and children.
Are kids, Ken, because more than 50% are under, it's a very young population, more than 50% are under the age of 18.
That's right. So it would be normal that's the highest part of the population that got killed, because they make up 80% of the population, 50% women and 30% children. So that's not news. I mean, obviously, if you dropped the bomb anywhere there, if you gave out free food, 80% would go to women and children because that's their percentage of the population. Okay, so we got it. So all right. I shouldn't comment on this because I'm prejudiced. I used to be, I've known a bunch of Jewish people, so I have a prejudiced viewpoint. Hey, Michael, what do you think? Michael, let's get another viewpoint. There you go.
Well, first of all, are you now talking to Michael, or do you mean Alex?
Yeah. I'm talking to the real Michael now.
Oh, okay.
There's a little bit of Michael in everybody, but since you are Michael, you have more of it than everybody else.
Let me see if I can get the real Michael on the line here.
Okay, go ahead.
What do I think of it? Well, I'll say this much. Okay. I believe that Hamas's figures you can't trust any figures coming from Hamas. That's how many kids. And I believe that You just can't trust Hamas at all. And you can trust them far less than you can trust Netanyahu or anybody other player, except maybe the Houthis. They can be trusted even less than Hamas. But that being said, what the hell's going on here? I mean, I thought the purpose Netanyahu was supposed to be getting the rest of the hostages back. I mean, I'm beginning to wonder if he said, well, there's probably only 25 or 30 left alive. That's not enough people to protest in the street. I mean, this could be a political calculation. We all know that prior to October 7th, the overwhelming majority of the Israeli population wanted Netanyahu out. All right. If he would have had an election on October 5th, he probably wouldn't have gotten even a minority government. So, what is he thinking here? I mean, is he thinking he's just got to continue the war? I think there could be a political calculation on Netanyahu's part, because I can't figure out, Hamas are jerks, they're pieces of shit, whatever. And they're out there celebrating, and putting on this show when they release the hostages, and yes, they should be removed from power and everything. But all that being said, why did Netanyahu launch these strikes? I mean, in other words, they didn't move on to the second phase. If Israel said Hamas wasn't, it was Hamas's fault, and even if it was Hamas's fault, Hamas wasn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, you just don't. I mean, the airstrikes restarting the war should have been the last option. I don't know why he just did this right then and there. If they had located a couple of militant leaders or something, but they killed plenty of militant. They killed most of the Hamas leaders, the military leaders. I mean, they've practically destroyed Hamas. And no, I don't think. By the way, it's not genocide. You diminish the word genocide. Genocide is the purposeful elimination of the entire race, creed, color, or religion, or whatever. No, but whether or not it's war crimes is another thing. But the fact is that I don't know what the hell he was trying to pull. I mean, why go immediately to your last resort, which is restarting the war and just decide to I mean, why try the stick before the carrot? Why try the stick without even giving people a chance at the carrot? I don't know why he did this at this point. If it was 3 weeks later and Hamas was still saying, no, we want more than we want this, and that, or we're not giving back the hostages, Israel could have said, something, there's nothing we can do to get those hostages back alive, so let's go for it. But I don't think that's the case now. I don't know. I mean, I looked at the news and said he launched a strike. I'm going, why? That's what I want to know. Why was it necessary for Netanyahu to do this now? I'd like to hear his explanation on why he made the choice to basically restart the war now at this point. And I haven't heard any answer, unless somebody here has, unless he's made a statement publicly to that effect. I mean, it's the same thing, like people ask you, Putin, when he invaded Ukraine, what does Putin want? Nobody knew. You want to take over the country? You want half of it? What does Netanyahu want here? I don't understand. Can somebody explain that to me? Why did he launch these strikes right now, at this point, before they even knew if they could salvage the second stage? I mean, before it was dead in the water. Anybody got an answer to that?
Jim, you want to take a stab at?
Jim is off.
Well, I mean, what I want to know is what I really want to know is, we all have our opinions. But what did Netanyahu make any statement as to saying exactly why he did it? Does anybody I haven't seen any.
I think he gave some signs because he let Ben Gavir back into his cabinet now.
Oh,
So,
great. That's terrific.
yeah. So he's it helps him
That's all we need.
politically because I think he has like now 68 of whatever 120 or so seats, and so basically, even if some of the Orthodox parties drop out, he'll still he'll still have a government. So and of course, so he's basically shoring up his right flank. And
Well, no, but what justification did he give for launching these strikes? I'm not talking about the real reason or anything.
he said Hamas broke the deal, I think is what he said.
In what way? How did they break the deal?
They didn't cave into Trump's demands essentially, but they didn't, of course, put it that way. But they didn't agree to release all the hostages like Trump demanded. Is essentially what they said.
But that wasn't the deal. The deal was they go to the next phase to get all the hostages.
And they essentially said before, because Trump had said, "Oh, whatever, we will unleash hell" or whatever he said this last time. So they're going off that. If you don't hand over all the hostages, in which case, of course, why would they? Because then you lose all your leverage you want. If you're going to do that, and actually Hamas said they would, if they wanted, they would, in exchange for, again, the Israelis releasing all of their hostages, but also the Israeli army leaving Gaza in its entirety, and and also sending the aid finally in. So they're happy to give all the hostages back in like one group again, if basically all the terms of the ceasefire are going to be met. And of course,
Well, can I ask a question? Let me ask one question. I'm sorry to interrupt. If the Israelis said, "Look, we're going to withdraw from most of the country, but we're keeping this buffer zone. We're holding on to that. We're holding on to these areas near the Israeli border, etc. And we're going to have some sort of non-Hamas aligned military presence there from somebody." Is Hamas saying, "No, we won't even negotiate"? Because they did say that the second phase was open to negotiation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, has Hamas shown any willingness to bend in that direction so that neither side gets everything they want, but it's a workable
situation? And they've said they want to continue the negotiations, and that they would basically, while negotiating, they would extend the current, truce essentially, either side, which of course, is also ignoring the violations of the ceasefire by Israel, where they've,
right,
killed people in Gaza in the middle of the supposed ceasefire, which again means it's of course not a real ceasefire. If one side wants to shoot back.
Well, that being said, though, I mean, but the idea is they wanted to continue the negotiations.
Yeah.
I can only say one thing, and I'll just throw this in. You can go on, but if I were the head of the Israeli government, which I wouldn't be, because I don't think, well, not in this government.
You're not crazy enough.
But the idea is, if I was, all of a sudden, made the head of the Israeli government now, I would say, look, we want the hostages back. The hostages that are most in danger of dying in the next few weeks or month while these negotiations drag on. In other words, I would say to Hamas, you are responsible for the health of those hostages still in captivity, even if the negotiations drag on for months. That's what I would say. That being said, as long as we get those hostages back and they're alive, the ones that were alive up until the point when the ceasefire was called, once we get them back, as long as they're going to be kept safe and relatively healthy, in other words, healthy enough that they're not going to be, catatonic for the rest of their life, or, in other words, confined to wheelchairs for the rest of their lives or something. And as long as they're alive, then I would say launching a strike is counterproductive. If you could have gotten, if you could get that concession from Hamas that they are responsible for keeping whoever's alive now alive, then negotiate.
And none of the hostages have died during the ceasefire, I'm pretty sure.
Probably not. No, but I'm just saying that would be the main worry.
But again, that's not what. Again, as we know, he's concerned about his political and his legal problems. And like they were saying, again, he doesn't have to go to court now. But again, and I don't know how much you've heard, Mike, about what's going on with the Shin Bet there, and what the attorney, where he's trying to basically it's really a combination of like it's the Israeli domestic intelligence agencies, kind of a combination of MI5 in the UK and the FBI. And again, Netanyahu's
I know what the Shin Bet is.
And
I know.
Well, I don't know if Ken knows how it's. I know Jim knows and but I don't know about Ken.
And he also wanted, remember, before October 7th, he wanted to get rid.
And the Israeli Attorney General said you can't. The law doesn't allow you to do that. That you need a reason essentially, and not just you don't like the guy or whatever. You can't be just arbitrarily fire him. I forget if he said that like the parliament has to vote to remove him or something like that.
In essence, the attorney general said, where do you think this is? The United States?
Yeah. So Netanyahu, like Trump, Netanyahu wants to be able to yes, he wants to put in loyalists, like he did with Gallant and Katz as the defense secretary, the minister, that replace, and then which will probably be bad for Israel because again it would just be some idiot who tells Netanyahu what he wants to hear. So if Netanyahu decides, as he's done multiple times, to do some stuff that's really dumb for Israel to do, but it's good for Netanyahu, then you have a guy who's like, go on, Bibi, this is great.
Well,
it's really again not someone who would stick his head in the ground and let another disaster like October 7th happen because
Okay. Yeah, I would go for the thing. I'd say the most curious thing I have is how did October 7th happen? How did that happen? Who took a nap? It's almost like Epstein hanging himself. Oh, the gods went to sleep. Oh, the camera didn't work. It's just unrealistic.
Same reasons that Pearl Harbor happened.
Right. It was a setup.
They didn't think Hamas was that good, which obviously
that's an excuse.
They didn't think Japan could or would attack Pearl Harbor.
Well,
I don't know.
Japan would attack the Philippines or something like that instead.
Actually, I have to. In other words, I think there were people certainly who did think Japan could attack major bases or something like that. With the United States, basically,
not the people in charge is the important thing.
Well, the people, but the idea is that I believe that Mossad, this from what I've seen, Mossad did know.
They had warnings. And
they had to know.
The women who were
right
near were telling them we see something happening. Jim can.
Well, wait. Before you go on,
Jim has the PDF to this guy's book on October 7th that just came out.
Yeah.
So, Mike, you should email him and ask him to send it to you if you want to. He gets into the nitty gritty of who knew what.
Send it to me. But from what I've seen, that Mossad told that the Netanyahu government may have purposely dropped the ball on that one.
Yeah.
And that would fit in with what you were saying, Alex, which is that they needed a war to get Netanyahu and his colleagues out of hot water politically within Israel.
But
right.
they didn't think it would be this big a disaster because obviously
maybe not.
Yeah.
But
that's speculation.
This is what happened October 7th was a clear threat to Israel's image in the Middle East, and still,
I think it was
other Arab countries who, again, of course, Israel's.
It's a setup job. It's sort of like 9/11. The buildings went down. the buildings went down and they
You don't want.
and they let us have the
and
Patriot
Jim-
Act.
Jim will wake up and start, yelling.
Nah,
about-
no. Because I said 9/11? No. It's the
the
buildings
thing
fell, and it's a question of why. So October 7th happened, and it's a question of why. But let's go to the thing about Schumer. I'm going to play it, okay? Let's see what it looks like. Here it comes. Oh, let me go back. Let me go back and make sure I turn on the thing. Whoops. Where am I? Here we go again. And that's, yeah. Oh, they are on.
It's on.
And, oh, I'm on mute. Am I on mute? I'm not on
No,
mute.
the video was on mute, it looked like.
Okay, wait a minute. Let me get it. Let me get it. Where did it go? Whoops.
I have it, Ken, if you want me to.
No. Give me a break. Give me a moment. Just a moment. All right. Let me get back here to the email and the here and oh, I don't have it there. Wow, look at that. I have the three. Oh, there it is. I got you. Sorry. Okay, now I got it. Okay, now I got it. And now I go to this and I say share, and it's got to be there. There it is. Okay.
Or the War and Peace Report. Senator Chuck Schumer is facing mounting calls to step down as the Democrat Senate leader after he voted in favor of Republican spending package Friday, which has been described as a blank check for the White House to keep defunding and dismantling government agencies and services. Groups including Indivisible, and Pass the Torch have since called for Schumer to step aside. On Friday, 11 young activists with Sunrise Movement were arrested at Schumer's D.C. office as they urged him not to, quote, compromise on our lives and futures ahead of the vote. The other Democratic senators who voted with Schumer to avert a government shutdown were Catherine Cortez Masto, Dick Durbin, John Fetterman, Kirsten Gillibrand, Maggie Hassan, Gary Peters, Brian Schatz, Jean Shaheen, and Independent Senator Angus King. This is Senator Schumer.
Mr. President, I believe it is my job to make the best choice for the country to minimize the harms to the American people. Therefore, I will vote to keep the government open and not shut it down.
We're joined right now by Waleed Shahid. He's a Democratic strategist whose new piece on Substack is headlined, "Schumer says Trump is an existential threat, then surrenders anyway." Waleed was previously the spokesperson for Justice Democrats and former senior advisor for the campaigns of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Jamal Bowman. Welcome back to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us. Why don't you respond to what Schumer did?
I think I've been involved in politics for about a decade, and this was one of the most utterly embarrassing strategic blunders on behalf of the Democrats that I've seen. Chuck Schumer, it would be one thing if House Democrats weren't going to fight, but they had House Democrats in vulnerable swing districts who took hard votes that they're going to have to answer for their constituents on. And then Schumer led them in a direction as if he was going to hold up the vote on this, and then surrendered at the last minute. And I think that, the Democrats and Chuck Schumer have spent a year warning the American people about Project 2025, warning people that democracy would be under existential threat under Donald Trump. And now with Elon Musk controlling Doge, what they're doing is Project 2025 on steroids. So you don't say there's a fire and then you give the arsonist a match and gasoline, and that's effectively what Chuck Schumer did. It's like if Democrats were rowing a boat and they had one person rowing on the left side and then the person on the right side just stopped rowing, and then they wonder why they're not moving. They're moving or they're staying still. Or
they're going in circles.
Or they're going in circles. And this is just one of the things that, people are really angry. And I think more than ever, we need ordinary citizens, ordinary Americans involved in our politics, engaged in politics, because the Democratic leadership, it is clear they're not going to stand up and fight against Trump and Musk in the way that grassroots Democrats want them to. I think what Chuck Schumer did, I have few words for it.
If he had signaled he was going to do that all along, that would be different. You would just differ with him supporting it, right?
Yeah.
But it was that he suggested he was going to vote against this. What did he say in a New York Times op-ed? He called Republicans a crowd of Trump sycophants and MAGA radicals who seem to want to burn everything to the ground, and accused Trump of wanting full control over government spending. Yet by supporting the Republican bill, wasn't he giving that power to Trump and Musk? Now,
it makes no sense. They had a chance, Democrats had a chance to tell the nation that the Republicans and Donald Trump were shutting down the government in order to protect Elon Musk, one of the wealthiest men in the world. That could have been the message over the next few weeks, and instead they folded and let the flooding the zone and the chaos continue. Schumer went in the Times and gave what I thought was a totally nonsensical interview where he said, our goal is to make the Republicans unpopular so that the fever breaks. That if we can get Trump's approval down under 40%, then soon Republicans will come to the table and negotiate with Democrats. And Schumer cited 2005 and 2017 as examples of that. We are not in 2005 or 2017. We are in the era of Project 2025 run by Elon Musk. And I don't think politics is about knowing what time it is. And I frankly don't think that Schumer knows what time it is.
I want to ask you about calls mounting for New York Congressmember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to challenge Schumer in his next primary election. She spoke on CNN about why she opposed the spending bill.
This turns the federal government into a slush fund for Donald Trump and Elon Musk. It sacrifices congressional authority, and it is deeply partisan. And so to me, it is almost unthinkable why Senate Democrats would vote to hand the few pieces of leverage that we have away for free when we've been sent here to protect Social Security, protect Medicaid, and protect Medicare.
Do you think Congressmember AOC should challenge Schumer?
I think someone should. That's her decision to make, but he's not up for primary until 2028, so we have a lot of work to do between now and 2028 to make that happen. My thing is the main thing we need is constituents in states like New York, constituents in all the places where the senators voted with Republicans on this continuing resolution.
Both New York senators did, Gillibrand and Schumer.
Also. We need people to stand up, go to their offices, make calls. You can join a group like Indivisible, Move On, Working Families Party, the DSA. There are many groups getting involved, and I think that Democratic leaders need to hear way more from their constituents. They snatch the ball from grassroots Democrats on this. Grassroots Democrats were ready to make a play here, ready to march in one direction. And Hakeem Jeffries had the House unified around something. And then Chuck Schumer divided Democrats. And now we're spending today all over the news talking about Chuck Schumer's surrender, his blunder, instead of talking about what Elon Musk is doing to the government.
So in this last minute, what can ordinary people do who aren't Congress members, who aren't senators? What difference does it make what actions people take?
I think senators and members of Congress need to hear way more from their constituents about the dangers of what it means for Senate Democrats to give up on this. People should be calling their senators, their members of Congress. People should be showing up to their office. They can go to websites like indivisible.org. They can join their local Working Families Party or DSA chapter. They can nominate a candidate through Justice Democrats. But the number one thing that I think people need to do is call their member of Congress and tell them that they don't think Chuck Schumer is up to the job, and they're angry at what his decision was to sell out grassroots Democrats in order to fund and support the Trump government, which they've warned us is an existential crisis to our country.
And Schumer's fear that it would be called the Schumer shutdown, and that a shutdown could even give more power to the executive?
I was so surprised that the federal union representing federal workers said that they were against Schumer's decision on this. These unions don't take these decisions lightly. And so when the union representing federal workers are saying, we are already experiencing a government shutdown, and we need you to fight.
We want to thank you, Waleed Shahid, for joining us. We'll link to your new article, Schumer Says Trump is an Existential Threat, Then Surrenders Anyway. That does it for our show. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.
Okie doke, another objective viewpoint on what's happening in the Capitol. It's nice. I can always rely on Amy Goodman. Didn't she look kind of like witchy, like her chin is getting bigger, it's sticking out more? I noticed
Getting older.
She's getting older, yeah, and more, what's that phrase called? Like, skinny. Anyhow, okay, so.
He needs a piece of.
But can anybody say what was any degree of sanity that Schumer might have executed in saying he's going to vote for the, to postpone the thing, carry things till September? Was there any sanity to it, or is it just?
I know. It depends what you think. If you think the Democrats will get blamed for the shutdown.
What was his excuse?
That's basically it.
Yeah.
That the Democrats would get blamed for the shutdown. But I think that there was a third way he could have tried, and that was to
go ahead,
shut it down and say, look, you're going to have to give in to the Republicans on a couple of these things. We're going to shut it down because this is too far over the line. But if you're willing to compromise a little bit, we'll, reopen. In other words, basically, it's their presentation. The Democrats did not put it out there and said, look, this is too egregious. We have no choice. We cannot do this to our constituents. We cannot do this to the nation. We cannot throw out the United States just to avert a shutdown. But if the Republicans will be willing to bend on a couple of issues, then we can avert a shutdown. If they would have phrased it like that, then they probably wouldn't have taken the blame for the shutdown. But they didn't make that point. And that's what the Democrats have a problem with right now, is how they frame their issues and how they communicate it to the public. They should have told the American people, we cannot possibly support this, but if they're willing to bend, compromise on just a couple of issues, not all of them, but just a couple of them, then we got a ball game. But this
Okay,
is
so who do they have that has some popularity, some positive popularity with the public that people would listen to them? Because I know Trump's ratings depends on the topic, but he's higher than he's ever been, and he's popular and he's got a strong thing. But who I know Schumer doesn't have public's not interested in what he says, and maybe AOC has a following, but it's limited that she's far left, and Gavin Newsom's got a good haircut, but what's her name? Abrams has taken a hit recently, and the girl from my neighborhood, Karen Bass, has taken a hit, and the black guy who shook her cane is taking a hit, and the Democrats in general sound like sourpuss at the speech that the president made, and they were all there holding up ping pong paddles and boos and all of this, and no claps and no stand-ups. Who represents Democrats that is a good spokesperson?
There are people like, I'm talking about both in the House and the Senate. There are people like Hakeem Jeffries. There are people like, Adam Schiff, obviously, and Amy Raskin.
Sly boy, sly.
No, in other words, but these people have some popularity. Kirsten Gillibrand, I'd like to know why she voted for it. Because she was more, Chuck Schumer, you know what they say, the most dangerous place to be is between Chuck Schumer and a camera. But
right.
Gillibrand is different. So something else was going on here.
But you're saying Gillibrand, whatever it is, she's a good spokesperson? The public likes her?
Yes, she would be a good. I'm talking about people that would hit the main part, not only the Democratic Party, but they would also hit some of the very few undecided. In other words, the
general public.
Well, not aligned people, and even some, wavering Republicans. Those are the people that should be the spokesperson for this, and should have made the point and say, look, we're willing to compromise, but no. When somebody says it's my way or the highway, then we got to say the highway. And that's how they should have framed it.
Yeah, but it'd be, I don't fit. So you're putting on the piece. I'm saying, what piece do you move on the chessboard? And you're saying Gillibrand. That's your choice.
Which people would replace Schumer? Well,
no, as a spokesperson, not as the head of the minority, but as a spokesperson to the public. Like, in other words, Trump put in the guy he put in as the head of the Secret Service now. He's very popular. He's loud and boisterous, but he's like a Joe Rogan character.
You can't have
Joe Rogan's very popular. Okay, who's popular with the Democrats?
You can't. The Republicans can get away with putting an idiot in as a spokesperson. The Democrats,
yeah, that's fine, but they're popular.
That's what I'm saying. In other words, you can be an idiot and be popular on the right, but you can't. It's harder to be an idiot and be popular when you move to the center or left of center.
Well, you got Fetterman. Fetterman's kind of popular. He's a regular guy.
That's true.
Fetterman.
He's popular. He's telling you what he thinks. He doesn't come across like he's He doesn't have the ability to hold three thoughts.
He pretends to be a working class guy because he's not. He's
Alex.
He's not.
Alex, we're not talking about whether or not you agree with him or he's good or bad. He's popular.
I know.
He's popular.
So
he's about the only one.
He gets reelected.
No, I think Gillibrand could do it, and
She's
and
a school teacher. She looked like your teacher.
come on, no, but she's popular.
Do you have
Jeffries,
your homework? Did you turn in your homework today? I mean, she's like a teacher,
Jeffries,
you know.
Hakeem Jeffries is also popular. You have a few people there.
She's
But
been good on some things.
Yeah, but
I mean, this
Schumer,
is a PR war. Politics is a PR war. I don't think the Democrats have. They're going to run Cuomo for mayor of New York. You know,
Well, he's running because I know
he's a
not-
popular
I
guy.
know.
He's
Well, we'll
popular.
have to see. I don't think know many people. Well, except maybe Gail. Gail liked him always. Maybe she'll vote for him. But are you going to vote for him, Como, Mike? I'm definitely not.
no, not well. I know people who work for him, so I think quite.
See, I don't think Jim's going to.
Well, anyhow, so that's the thing. Schumer doesn't have it. He doesn't have the charisma to take on. I'm the noble knight who's going to fight the Republican Party and the villain Trump. You know,
Schumer has the balls to do it. Well, not this time, but Schumer normally has the balls to do it. But as far as popularity goes, I don't think he was ever that popular.
No, he's not. I mean, that's why he never ran for president.
Right. I mean, he just
which I'm sure he would love to do, but you know.
Yeah, he had seniority. I mean, but no, he'll take people on, but I don't think he has the following that Gillibrand or Jeffries certainly, or Fetterman. He doesn't have that kind of following. He doesn't really have a following, Schumer.
Yeah.
He's just the guy in charge.
Oh, he's
Right.
He's the money guy. He's the guy that all the, big billionaires give money to, and
yeah, he's the Jew.
That's why
he's
the majority. Well,
he's the Jewish guy who knows everybody in finance.
Because he's the guy Wall Street gives money to, and then he spreads it
There
around.
you go.
But in Trump,
okay, so that's that
people
point.
forget. Wait, one more point.
Wait,
People
so
forget
Jim's. Let's just check to see.
Well, wait. Just before you go on, people forget.
No, Jim's he's a phantom. That's a phantom. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
In Trump's first term, I remember there was a sit down where Schumer was really cutting into Trump. He was sitting there with Nancy Pelosi, and he was making a monkey out of Trump. And I remember one of the commentators said, "This is what happens when you bring politics to the boroughs," because they're from Queens and Brooklyn. So the idea is, but I remember this argument that was going on, and Schumer was gutting Trump on that. So he has the ability to take Trump on. And that's another disturbing fact. He has the ability, he has the weight to throw around, and he can be pretty belligerent, pretty aggressive. Why didn't he do it this time? Why didn't he say, look, guys, in other words, we'll take the highway. If it's your way or the highway, we'll take the high road or the highway. So, and then if you're not going to bend on anything, he could have done that. I don't know why. Something's going on here.
Well, who do you think is running the Democratic Party?
Good question. Good question.
What are you doing it for? Who do you want him? Who do you want him to
Behind
be?
the scenes. You're talking about behind the scenes.
Actually, yeah.
But I mean, the guy, the back.
Is it still Obama and Clinton and Nancy Pelosi? That's the general consensus is it's Obama, Clinton, and Hillary Clinton, maybe Bill Clinton, and Nancy Pelosi, and that's it.
I don't know. It's a good question. It's a good.
Nobody.
Calling the shots.
Somebody's got to be in charge, right?
Well, not necessarily.
Well, they have funds to dispense to distribute for campaigns, and they have agenda or positions to develop, and send out an article to people to say repeat this on your campaign channel. There's got to be some kind of governance. Maybe it's just Obama.
Well, that's the Democratic National Democratic chairman of the Democratic Party. But
who's that? Who is the chairman?
Alex, restore my memory. Who's the DNC chairman?
I don't even remember now.
Well,
it's a person with fantastic public appeal. You don't even know who it is. A guy named Ken Martin.
Well, there you go. Obviously, there's nobody, whoever's calling the shots isn't calling them very well, and isn't really calling them. So,
Oh, I got a picture of him. He's a black guy from Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So
Well,
they're going with that. They're doing the identity politics.
well, no.
Give this black
Republicans
man a
did that too.
chance. Make him the head of the DNC.
It's not
Actually,
identity.
no. The photo. Wait, no, Ken, because this is. If so, you got the wrong Ken Martin, because the Ken Martin I see, he's a white guy.
Oh,
This
okay.
guy.
No, I got somebody else. It came up with, I said DNC chairman, and they brought up a guy from
This guy.
Philadelphia who was supposed to be
Chair of the Democratic.
Jamie Harrison. But no, it's
He stepped in February. So yeah, he's a white guy. Not identity.
This is indicative.
Not a
that
woman.
oh yeah, I got him. He's a
Maybe
white
he's
guy. He's a white guy. You're right.
We're all sitting here
Could be
trying to
chaos.
figure out who the Democratic National Committee chairman is. I mean, how many times in the past would we have had to do that?
No, he's just a white heterosexual male. So yeah, there's definitely no identity stuff going on with him.
He looks like a Presbyterian preacher.
Just another, I think he's a WASP actually.
Yeah.
So he's,
Tim Walz endorses Ken Martin, a fellow Minnesotan, to lead the DNC.
Right, from the Midwest.
There he is.
Well, I'm glad he's really stepping up to the plate here.
Well, no, I mean, if you guys want to have fun at some point, I saw somebody sent around. This third way organization that's typical Democrat centrist. They had their I can find something. They had some big meeting about what the party should do in the next to beat Trump, and it's basically all about, well, we have to pretend to be working class. Didn't say anything, well, very much about we have to actually have policies. It was all about, well, we need to have more working class, politicians, basically. We need, and as the public face of the party. And we also need to cater they need to cater to the right more. They need to consider cater to the right-wing religions. We shouldn't attack capitalism. But again, nothing about, well, we should actually offer these policies that'll get people to vote for us. It's all about image. How be Republican.
Earlier in this show, somebody mentioned
about our country. I mean, what we're not looking at it. If we have, in order to play off, if there are that many people in this country who you have to do that kind of thing to play to. In other words, to swing to the right. Think about this. I mean, do we have the country? I mean, I don't think the United States that I was brought up to believe in exists anymore.
No.
At least not in spirit, that's for sure.
No.
75 million people voted for Trump the second time.
But it never did, in a way, because I mean, there were things about the country that you and I ignored for a long.
Yeah, but Al,
I mean, the country in the 50s, again, economically things were good, but there are a lot of horrible things about, especially if you live in parts of the country.
Racism.
If you were a woman, for example, you literally could not have your own credit card or your own bank account. You could be raped by your husband, and the law did not protect you. Things like that. Obviously, you're very, if you want to get a job as a woman or
wait a second. A woman could be raped by Mike's husband?
By your husband.
By my husband?
Her husband.
I don't have
it
a
was
husband.
legal. It was legal in most marital rape was legal. You could not be prosecuted for it until I don't know the 60s. There's some certain point, but it was. I mean, again, this is most of the world, of course. So it's not.
Well, actually, Alex, it wasn't that simple. The idea is if a guy, beat the hell out of his wife, yeah, he can be charged.
Well, I'd like to paraphrase Donald Rumsfeld. You have to run with the company of voters that you have, not the ones you want.
Well, that what got
you
us.
go into an election with the public that is there, not the one that you think should be there. And this country is not
the
just
Democrats keep losing.
It's not just New York, Washington D.C., Philadelphia, and San Francisco and Portland. No, there's other cities around in between the great flyover territory.
I just think the Democratic assumption is, Trump's going to be so bad they don't have to do anything, and they'll just, win in 2022 and 2024. But even if that does work,
that's it. Then they got just keep kidding, convincing everybody Trump is evil and everything he's doing is criminal. Right. Just keep going. I think that got him elected, by the way. I think that got him elected. Everybody knows that it was bullshit.
Well, because no, it's not that it's bullshit. It's just that there's 75 million people that voted for him and another 20 million people that were okay with it. I mean, they didn't necessarily like it, but they'll let it go. And I'm sorry, that's too many people in one country. America is not a good country. It's not a good-hearted country.
It's not a good-hearted country. Well, okay.
Again, Mike, it never was.
Go spend a vacation in Somalia or Kenya.
This is like the people who think.
Wait! It's not a competition. And by the way, America always had problems. It always had racism. We didn't even get into World War II until we were attacked. But there was some sense in at least most of the country of shame. You didn't come right out and say, those, you didn't make racist remarks right out in public, well, at least the last 100 years or something, where you were blatant about it, where you
Wait a second.
You made it a source of pride. You were proud, not just that you did these things, but now people are proud of it. They think it's good.
You got to be kidding. You got to look it up. Go look it up on Google or Wikipedia, the ranking of which countries are the most racist. You talk like America's the number most racist country in the world. And you just can't say it's racist or not racist according to your opinion. You got to do a comparative example to other countries.
No, it's not comparative.
Why not?
If 75% of the countries in the world are virulently racist, they're not good countries. I don't care if it's 30% or 75%. They're not good countries.
Okay.
That's all. That's my evaluation.
So that you don't like the fucking planet. So you hope you can go to Mars.
Okay. It's just the people living on it. No, there are a lot of good people in the world.
Well, we can get rid of the bad ones and replace them with kangaroos, right?
Well, that might not be a bad idea. Kangaroos are okay. And at least they hit. The idea is that, look, I'm just saying right now, if you look at Canada versus the United States, which I'm always looking at, and I can say to myself, gee, with the values I was raised in, with the American values I was raised in, Canada is by far and away the better country. By far and away.
As long as you don't offend anybody. If you offend somebody, you can go to jail,
In Canada?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, no, you're wrong, Ken. And I can prove it. Because if you offend an American, you ain't going to jail.
You can offend an American, but you can't offend you can't say anything. You can't fat shame or whatever. I don't know. Maybe I got it UK, they're arresting people for what they say on Twitter.
You know something, if it's a threat, if it's in other words, if people are saying, hey, all fat people should be killed,
no, that's criminal. No, the question is, if you say doesn't look too good, fat people are not attractive, that's negative.
Well, you can't be arrested.
In the UK, you can.
No, you can't be arrested in the UK for saying
I
don't think fat people are attractive. Yeah.
Okay.
What you can be is, when you're saying something that's, against who they are and is advocating, it's not as, being arrested. However, what you may be referring to is that you might not be hired for certain jobs if you publicly state things like that. Yeah, you can be barred from certain jobs for breaking those principles, for breaking with that. It's funny because if you take a what do they call it, a sexual harassment video test, which I had to take all the time to do this standardized patient work. You had to take it every year. Same test, you still had to take it every year. They wanted to make sure that you didn't change your mind in the previous year or something. Anyway, some of it is ridiculous. Some of it's common sense. And some of it is like, it is a little over the top. But the idea is that in practice, no, if you say to a woman who comes into your office, "Wow, you really look gorgeous today," chances are, if they try to fire you for that, you're going to be, it's not going to hold. But if you try to hit on a woman constantly, if you're her superior, you're her boss, and you say, "Hey, go out with me," and she doesn't go out with you, and then she doesn't get a promotion, yeah, then you might be in a little trouble.
I understand. Okay. We'll get to utopia. Just keep working on it.
Well, that's the aim, isn't it? You're never going to get there. You keep working towards it. You're never going to get to the best of all possible worlds.
Some people like to eat raw chicken and beer, There's different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
Have you ever got, do you go, you know how many people I know personally that go skiing even when they're 70? I've never gone skiing, or to go deep sea diving, or they go, they do all kinds of stuff I've never done, and I wouldn't do.
But you don't have a right to make other people go skiing or go deep.
No, I'm just saying that there's different strokes for different folks. So some people would say it's more important to fund the snowmaking machinery than it is to feed the poor people in San Francisco or starving to death on the sidewalk while
that's why we decide where the money's going. And when we decide,
we don't decide. The bureaucracy decides.
Right. So, but the idea is that says who we are as a country. If we start saying, we're going to cut out all this charitable garbage, then that says who we are.
It's a challenge to me that the U.S. decides to do all this charity without putting it up to a referendum. They just decided, we're taxing you and we're giving the money. We're going to fight HIV in Africa and fight this and make people friendlier to LGBTQ, all the things they decide to do in the USAID and other State Department funds and so forth, all kinds of ridiculous things. And it's a question of when did we come to an agreement about that? It's sort of like when
it is, and it does have to do with American security issues. For instance, if we're fighting a disease in Africa, we're not
so that it doesn't come here, right?
Exactly.
I don't think so. Nope.
There's if we're saying, we're giving aid to other countries. Remember, there's a political calculation to this. It's not all, altruism.
I know. It's usually the CIA overthrows the government, puts in somebody favorable to U.S. businesses.
Or
that's the funds that go through USAID.
Or we have the goodwill of that country on our side, rather than, let's say, China, Russia.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask you something. That we were talking about something earlier, and somebody said, "Well, we had the union, and they're a big union." That's not a big issue with the public. There's not that many people in the public that are in a union. I don't think the public positively or in a majority support unions like they used to, maybe in the 30s.
There's a lot of people in unions.
I don't think so.
Yeah, there are. Well, look it up.
Okay. Let me take a look.
Union members?
That's real fast. That's real easy. Percentage of what are you doing?
That's consistently gone down.
But it's still a substantial portion.
Like 18%.
But Alex, it's still a lot of people. I mean, it may
Yeah,
not be
yeah.
percentage it
But
was.
it used to be in the 30s. Which is the,
Well, I would say but I would say that no, it's
and
not a majority.
I would, well, I know it's much, I don't know what the numbers are, but it's much higher in Europe and in Canada.
Yes, it's much higher almost everywhere else. But we've had a lot of union busting things that went on since the beginning of the Reagan administration.
Yeah.
So,
But here's actually what shows that
Okay, I got the number, the flat rate at 10 and
you can
1022,
Musk
10.1%.
Musk is totally wrong about the whole efficiency thing, because as somebody was pointing out, the number of government workers is remained about 3 million for the last 50 years. So obviously they are getting more efficient as time, because the population has gone up like 70% or something like that. But
Yeah,
the same number of government workers are.
I think that I challenge that statistic. It can't be true.
No.
50 years, 3 billion people.
Yeah,
3 million.
no.
But where'd you get that?
That's from Richard Wolff, who's getting it from the.
Richard Wolff. Come on.
he's basing it on U.S. government data. He's not.
No, he's not.
Well, look up the U.S. government data.
Yeah. But anyhow, 10.1% of U.S. citizens are in unions. 10.1%. But most of the union members, like 76% of union members, voted Democratic. So they vote Democratic, but it's 10.1% of the population are in unions. Now, it can have an effect in voting because your father's in a union or you like unions, blah, blah, blah. But only 10% are in unions because unions are, equal pay for everybody. And what was the other issue?
But wait a second.
How many people?
Here's something, but this is not here. This is not including the military. So this is
right.
It also doesn't include
just a slight increase. This is just the civilian workforce, and you can see you can see Trump increased it too. So much for efficiency, and you can see it's not going up.
From 50 years ago was 1970, right?
But again, this doesn't include the military. 3 million.
Yeah, I know.
Military.
Okay, executive branch, civilian employment since that's executive branch. Executive workforce. Here we go. Ta-da!
Could you make that bigger?
Oh, what? You're not looking at it.
Of course I'm sharing. That's why I want you to make it bigger.
Oh, who's that? Alex, you're doing that?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, I'm looking to find out what the numbers are.
And that's pretty big.
So Trump increased it.
Yeah. So again, you see it's going up. See Obama increased it. Well, and that was, of course, that makes sense. That was in the middle of the recession.
Okay, so here I got a chart. I'm gonna kill yours and pull this one up.
All I see is your face, Ken.
All you see is my face. Yeah, I gotta share it.
That's not much of a chart.
Here we go.
Well, there's a lot of lines through it.
There we go. Okay, total employment.
Could you make it less blurry?
What? Make it what?
Less blurry.
No, I don't think so. Let me see if I can zoom in. I can't seem to zoom in.
Actually,
but anyhow, it's Biden.
That's the same chart Alex put up.
Yeah.
Well, but the point is, it's increasing.
And here's a better chart because this
Clinton.
goes back.
Okay,
this
go ahead.
Probably here. You stop sharing. I'll show this because this shows.
Okay, I have to figure out how to stop sharing. I can't get out. I can't get out. Wait a minute.
Wait, oh, you got it.
I'm trying to get out.
This is from the Bureau of Labor. So these are better.
Okay, I stopped sharing.
That shows again. Here. So here, obviously, this is.
What year?
Bigger.
This is here from 40.
Can't you zoom in or make it larger? Go full screen.
can see it's about.
It's not increasing that
Yeah.
much.
So you go back to 68 again. It's a little. Go to 70.
It peaked in 90. It said it peaked
3
in
million,
1990 at 4.4 million.
It hit the actual peak was actually ironically under both.
Well, it's been too large for too
0.4,
long.
and then so it's around 3 million. Again, it's
Right.
around 3 million back in, go all the way back to 1943.
Well, that's during the war, you know.
And that's with a population, less than half what it is now. So again, like I was saying, again, they're
Too many people.
efficient. They have to be efficient because again, they're working for 330 million people. As I think like 1970 is like 200 million Americans or something around there.
But it's a good point.
And you can
I
see
think
again
that's a good point.
over time, the percentage has
Well, I'll tell you
gone
what,
down,
though, you're gonna have one fewer person on this show because I got to make a store by midnight.
Okay,
Yeah,
adios,
same-
amigos.
Same Ken I got. We should.
Okay, so that's it. Good night, everybody. It's 11:30. Go get your bottle of beer, Mike.
Yeah.
Before they close, and a pack of
For the
cigarettes.
roasteries,
Smoke one for me, please.
A lot of places close at midnight. And
Okay.
I gotta get normal stuff, but
You got to
all right.
move out of the Hicksville and go into the big city.
well, Mike's not. Well, he's out in the outer boroughs, but he's not in Hicks.
Okay.
No,
Good night,
I'll-
everybody. We're done. We're ending.
We're done.
It's enjoyable. I enjoyed this little bit of argument. Bye-bye, everybody.
I'm
I
leaving.
can go a lot further out from where Mike is.
Okay, you friends, for everyone watching, we're ending the show now. This is going viral. 2025, March 19th.
I guess, yeah.
And it's over
I guess
now.
We'll see you on Sunday for Jim's.